All right, folks, welcome to the Happiest Retirees podcast. Today is a very special edition. It's the 1 year anniversary show. So, we thought it might be a good idea to take some time for ourselves. And by ourselves, we mean yourselves, because this is really for you. And we're going to go through and point out some of the most amazing lessons that we've learned from interviewing these incredible happy retirees. And I can't do this alone. Just wouldn't be right. So I'm bringing in producer Mallory. She's going to help us sift through the genius.
Whoop, whoop.
Mallory?
So excited to be here. Thanks, too little.
Well, you make so much magic happen. It only made sense to kind of pull you out of the hat and get you on stage here.
Dude, I don't know how you come up with your, little lines here, but, it's just magic constantly. You wanna talk about some magic there.
Oh, well, thank you, thank you. It's, ask my wife, she says it's not always magic. But let's get right to it. I wanna start off and yes, she was our very first episode, so she will always hold a special place in my heart, but she really stands the test of time. Her name's Jill Smith Intrican, and she was a teacher for over 30 years, which is enough, right? Like, you could sail off into the sunset and live happily knowing you had done that. You had changed that many lives. But for her, that whole time while she was teaching how to write, she secretly wanted to be the one writing. So in retirement, she became a published author. She's now got 3 books published, and that's really hard to do, by the way, to write it and to get it published. She's just, such an inspiring person, and for me, it made me realize that, I think we all have secret hopes and dreams that we kinda push down because maybe we're scared we won't be able to do it. We won't be able to actually be as good as we think we might be. And she overcame that, and it really paid off. And I think if other people take that lesson, they can do the same thing for themselves. What do you think?
I agree. I feel like we so often with the Retire Sooner Network hear from folks who are so interested in doing things like writing or I remember acting that was one thing that came out. This is years ago. We were recording a commercial and we had some actors come in who were in their, I think their 60s. And it was, I remember talking with one of the women and she was like, oh, yeah, I retired and I've always wanted to act. So I've just started taking it up. And now and there she is
Wow.
in a commercial, which was so cool.
Exactly. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's exactly what I mean. Yeah, like, just go for it, right?
exactly. It's it's I saw recently some kind of breakdown on how just the timelines for different folks, and I think it was Colonel Sanders who from,
Oh,
KFC.
yeah.
And
He's no chicken, or maybe he is a chicken, I'm not sure.
he wasn't a spring chicken whenever he opened up KFC. It was I think he was, already in his 50s. There's just, really there's no time limit on success in life, and I think that so many
Yeah.
people get to experience that joy after they get to feel like they can stop focusing on the paycheck and instead focus on the dream.
Exactly, and I think what separates us from Colonel Sanders is that we want to give you the recipe for success, and I think he keeps his recipe hidden.
Very
You'd have to really
secretive.
pay billions, yeah. One other thing I wanted to say about Jill Smith Intrigan, she has it's not like she's had this smooth sailing. She has a beautiful family, but she lost her husband to Lewy body dementia along the way, which has to be just devastating. And not even that could stop her, and I think also the rest of her family came together to help her get through that, to find a way to keep going, and so I think that general attitude of overcoming grief and finding purpose and being happy, is just the best thing you can do in life, even in those tragic situations.
I feel like that's something that I've also I've seen it, honestly. I've seen it with some people. I've seen anytime, I've personally gone through something and I don't wanna say, my life's been that hard, let's be very clear. I've been a very individual, but anytime I've kind of gone through something difficult, I it's interesting to sort of see that, you kind of need those lifelines where it's something else outside of or bigger than or maybe not even bigger than, but just something different and totally unrelated to, all the other stuff that you're going through to just keep you above water and keep you moving forward, and so I think having something
Yeah.
these core pursuits, this writing, this dream that she wanted, probably really helped her be able to, like, grow and feel confident and kinda not move past the grief, because I don't know if you ever truly, like, are able to get past that, maybe
Right.
just grow with it and become she
Yeah,
is today.
exactly. And since you brought up core pursuits, and on a lighter note, I wanted to make sure to mention for Jill that she has so many core pursuits. And for people listening, those are hobbies that are more than hobbies. They're hobbies on steroids that get you out of bed in the morning. And she has so many. She had to skip yoga just to make it to the interview. So I thought that was a good sign.
I loved that. I feel like that's so common for a lot of our happy retirees that you've been interviewing this last year is they are so busy, they're just trying to squeeze you into the schedule.
Exactly. Exactly. So many of them say, "I didn't think I'd be this busy," but they all are. So I think it's pretty clear that happiness comes from staying busy, not from sitting on the Barca lounger, you
Yeah,
know?
I totally agree. Yeah, but I will say, I
Yeah.
think that, they're busy with things that they really enjoy. It's you know how, like,
Exactly.
sometimes you get, like, in that mix where it's just, like, it's you gotta do all the things and it's not stuff you wanna do, but you're just busy just to be like, it's not that. It's things that spark joy.
Yes. Exactly. That's like in retirement, you can be busy with the things that you want to be busy with. That's kind of the brass ring of retirement. So that wraps us up for Jill. And I want to go on to the next person who makes me laugh every time I think about her. She was just such a pleasure. Her name was Ingrid Ricard. And the lesson for her is if you can't beat them, join them. So Ingrid had a successful career financially, everything's on track. Um, but she said to herself, you know what? Some people don't mind being unhappy, but I'm not one of those people. I like to be happy. And what she loves doing is traveling. So she made a plan, so much so that on the day of her retirement, she got on a plane. Like she didn't even wait for the next day, right? The cake was still in the kitchen at her office probably. She got on a plane, went to Costa Rica and started this amazing retirement life of traveling. And she's so smart that she noticed travel agents get, perks and benefits. So she decided just to become a travel agent. I mean, mainly so that she could enjoy traveling more than she was before. And now all those exotic locales are write-offs for her.
Brilliant. It's so smart.
It's so smart. And I know you're someone who likes to travel, so part of me thinks you might become Ingrid Ricard one day.
You know,
Soon.
if I'm smart enough, I absolutely will. I hope that I can pull that off. That would be the dream. You know what else I remember about her interview is how infectious her laugh was. That
Oh my
was
gosh, so much.
she was just a hoot and a half. Oh, and then you know what else I loved about her interview too? Is how I remember her talking about how, she could because she loved to travel so much and because she was just a very busy individual, I think she said that, like, she was having a hard time with her love life and finding somebody to
Yeah.
keep up with, which,
Yeah.
like, I that's I love it. She's like, "If I find somebody who's willing to travel with me, like, I'm all about it." But she was traveling with friends, she was traveling solo. It was very inspirational because she was just doing what she was passionate about, and she was very excited traveling solo. She was talking about how she was able to make a ton of friends, and I think maybe just,
Yeah.
travel a little bit more at her own speed, and that's one of those things. Traveling by myself scares me a little bit, so it was very
Yeah.
inspirational to sort of hear her say how she was able to jump in and do that with confidence.
Oh, absolutely, and I remember that moment because I didn't expect her to go there, and she really went in and told us about her love life a little bit and how travel affected that, and, she was just such a delight to just kind of tell us to regale us with these stories of far-flung fun, I guess you
I
could say.
That was the first episode where you asked for some bochincha, isn't it?
The Bochinche report, which was trying to get some gossip out of each retiree, and Ingrid really was the godmother of Bochinche. And Mallory really, really lit up when we said the word hot gossip.
I just love hot
So,
gossip, just so we're very clear, it's my favorite.
all right. Well, thank you, Ingrid. We will thank you for bringing me endless smiles from now until eternity. Okay, so on the next lesson. This guy's kind of a pro. He's actually been in the retirement game, writing about it before he retired. His name's Rich Eisenberg. His career is really really impressive. He's written for USA Today, Good Housekeeping, CBS Money Watch. He spent 10 years as a managing editor for PBS Next Avenue. And a lot of our listeners know what Next Avenue is. It's sort of like they call it like the Sesame Street for retirement because it has so much great educational value and really good writers too. So anyway, Richard retired, and his big thing was finding that balance between retiring and not retiring. And so he borrowed a phrase from a friend of his called unretirement, and that's how he lives his life. He says he's unretired. So he still does a lot of work, but he doesn't work when he doesn't want to work, right? So that's, I think, a big lesson for people. Just because you retire doesn't mean you have to stop doing the thing you were doing if you liked doing it. It just means you can kind of pick and choose when you're going to do that. I don't know, Mallory, what do you think about his choices and unretirement?
So what I thought was really interesting with his interview is how how much we have seen it echoed through every other interview that we've had. I know on the producer side of things how many guests we've had who have given us pushback because 'cause they're like, "Well, I'm kind of retired or I'm not really retired," because they are that unretired where maybe they had a very long and fulfilling career previously, but to your point, they took that unretirement approach where they're then able to focus on these passion projects, the writing, the travel agent. You know, we've talked with so many folks who've done a variety of different things. I know you just interviewed a guy who literally carves pumpkins, and it
That's right. Yeah.
I'm so excited about that episode. But it's so interesting to sort of see how people are able to take and craft retirement into something. You know, we used to think of it as you finish working and then you would go and, I don't know, putter around the garden. And now really I think we're just seeing this new generation is coming in and they're very active and engaged and they're not slowing down so much as they're just shifting gears.
Exactly. I think that's a really good way to put it, switching gears. Because you're not turning off all the gears, then the car is gonna sit there and rust, you know?
Exactly.
You're
Exactly.
you're shifting. Yeah. Yeah, you're really good at this.
Oh,
Did you
thank
know
you.
that?
It's like I've been doing this for a minute.
And I had mentioned it, when I was talking about Rich, but his friend who wrote kind of was the guy who came up with the term unretirement. His name was Chris Farrell. So you're welcome to go and read his books on unretirement and baby boomers. I know that would make Rich happy, and we love making Rich happy. So on that note of being happy, I'm going to move on to our next lesson. This is a married couple, um, Gail and Dixon Grimes. Now, what they did was they pulled this off after a career of, you know, raising kids and working. They kind of picked back up their love of playing the clarinet, and they took it all the way to Carnegie Hall. Now, there's the cliche, how do you get to Carnegie Hall? Practice. And they did practice, but they also gave it time. And so I think the lesson here is know when to pull the clarinet out of the closet. We all have some kind of metaphorical clarinet sitting in our closet that we think, God, I'd really like to play that. Why did I stop playing that? But sometimes we think, I guess it's too late. I'm never gonna pull that out of the closet. So Gail and Dixon Grimes, they, like I said, the realities of life don't really leave us all the time we want to pursue our dreams. And as upstanding parents, they had jobs, they had responsibilities, they had to raise their kids and make sure enough money was coming in, food was on the table. But as soon as they saw that opening, they pulled that clarinet out of the closet and just went full force. They started their own clarinet group. They played in a local, kind of a famous local clarinet symphony group, and they kept it up, and finally applied to play at Carnegie Hall and were accepted. And they said the moment of playing there and hearing the acoustics, the kind of famed acoustics of Carnegie Hall, was just one of the most breathtaking moments of their lives. Mallory, do you have a clarinet in the closet?
I it's not a clarinet specifically, but I like to say that I'm a core pursuit dabbler. I love, like, picking up, like, little
Oh,
hobbies here and there, and so I've got, like, a million different projects that are, like, started, partially finished, definitely not done now, like, in a couple different places, and I love to kinda pick those up. So I'm absolutely on that train. But, one thing I will just to agree with what you're saying with these guys. I One thing that I really love too is, like, not only did, like, the clarinet bring them together, they met in band, I believe, in college, isn't that right?
yes, they did, yeah.
Yeah,
I
and
think they
then
met at a football game because they were in the band.
yeah, yeah, and then I remember them talking about how their children then, I think, also got into band, and so not only was this a passionate hobby that they picked up when they were in retirement and, like, really followed through with, but I think their kids also got involved, and it became a little bit more of a family affair even to a certain degree, which I think is so beautiful.
I do too. At least one of their sons also plays clarinet, and I think the other one is involved too.
Yeah, yeah, I'm pretty sure, and then
Yeah.
it's interesting because it's similar setup where it was a family hobby that kind of became enjoyed, but not necessarily clarinet because I know not everybody's musically inclined, but, I
Yeah.
know we've got some friends whose parents, retired and actually picked up a farm. They picked up, like, some land, they started getting really into farming, the wife was really into the kinda, like, herbs and everything, and their kids were also very into that, and so now they've got, their kids are very involved with the farm, they're very, like, it takes up all their time and energy,
Wow.
and they love it, and so I feel like this probably happens more often than we realize, and this is maybe something that we can explore as we keep going forward with this deal a little, but I could see how, when you have things that are core pursuits as a happy retiree, I'd be interested to sort of see how much of that kind of falls in, like, where, the family and, like, the children and grandchildren even ultimately also end up taking part in these core pursuits and really enjoying and loving them. My aunts and uncles and cousins love tennis. Oh, that's a huge thing for them. They'll
Oh,
travel to
okay.
the US Open, like, they'll play
Oh.
all the time. Very competitive, I can't get on the courts with them, it's terrible, but but it's just interesting to sort of see whatever these, kind of family dynamics, I think, spring up around these core pursuits.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, and I wanna clarify, so were they farmers at all before, or that was just something they decided to do?
I think they had maybe grown up around some property, but they
Okay.
actually in their previous life, the husband was a I don't wanna say he was a roofer, he had a roofing company, and the wife was a teacher. And then they both retired onto some property and started farming, and it's
Wow.
and they've just sort of let that grow, and that property has just become a huge piece of their life that they love, and they're very passionate about, and it's really beautiful to see.
Well, I feel like farming is very fertile territory, you know,
You might say it grew deep roots.
Yes, exactly.
Uh,
Okay, well, during that, you mentioned the word dabble, and so I would be remiss if we're gonna talk about dabbling, not to talk about the dabble master. Her name is Nancy Crew. And her lesson to me was retirement is a guilt-free excuse to dabble. I tend to have some perfectionist qualities, if you want to use the word qualities, because it doesn't mean that everything I do is perfect. It means a lot of times I don't even do the thing I want to do because I'm worried about it not being perfect. But what Nancy taught me was she uses the word dilettante, which is a fancier word, and, so I had to actually go to the dictionary, to look it up. It's a person who cultivates an area of interest, such as the arts, without real commitment or knowledge. And Nancy, the dabbler, became Nancy the dilettante in retirement because she tries all sorts of things and doesn't put pressure on herself to become an expert. I mean, she's doing oil painting, knitting, video editing, home renovation, playwriting, screenwriting, fiction writing, life drawing, singing in a choir, photography. You get the point. She's up to her elbows in dabbles, and it's bringing her happiness because she's just enjoying it. And the ones she likes, she keeps doing. The ones she doesn't, she stops doing. And this is a person who was extremely successful as working at a newspaper, and she still writes when she wants to, and she's sort of sought after, so she's able to say yes or no. I don't know. I thought it's weird to be inspired by someone who calls themselves a dilettante, but I am, and I love Nancy Crew. And I could see you doing some dabbling,
Oh,
Mallory.
absolutely. I need to steal that word. I need to get better about using it. Dilettante?
Yeah, dilettante.
Dile
It's a nice word.
It's a beautiful word and, like, it's so
Yeah,
accurate, yeah, like, but I love
yeah.
that, that's absolutely my MO, and it's interesting because I think what she was talking about really kinda comes back to a lot of, we had an interview several years ago on Retire Sooner. Wes was interviewing a guy who wrote a book called Beginners, if I'm remembering correctly.
Mm,
Yes.
Tom Vanderbilt, I
Yes,
think.
thank
Yeah,
you, and
yeah,
it was so interesting because Tom Vanderbilt's whole thing was just getting comfortable with this idea of being a beginner, and it's something that I think that as we get older, we're all inherently much less comfortable with. We feel like when we do something, we should be good at it. We should be good at it immediately, and if we're not good at it, it's not worthwhile, and his argument was, "Why? That's just not how it works. Be okay with learning and trying and doing and embracing that curiosity," and I think a lot of what her ethos is really mimics that, and it really complements that.
absolutely. And I'm so glad you brought up beginners because, and for people, I'm sure everyone knows Wes Moss, who hosts the Retire Sooner podcast. That's the mothership. We're on the Retire Sooner network, and that's the big show, right? And so we love lessons that we can learn from Wes. He's taught us a lot, and it's interesting when something really sticks with him because he's got a lot coming at him. And I've noticed that he brings up Tom Vanderbilt fairly often, so I can tell it really stuck with him.
Totally agreed. I think that that's when hearing from an expert that it's okay to be bad at something is so rare these days, and nowadays, I feel like everybody's like, "If it's not perfect, if it's not great, don't do it." And
Yeah.
to have people like Nancy Crew and Tom Vanderbilt saying, "Don't worry about that. Just focus on the doing." It's so fun, it's so freeing, and it sounds exactly like what I want for retirement. If I'm not worried about it being excellent, like, I'm just worried about doing it, it just sounds joyful.
Yes, me too. This is a lesson I'm definitely gonna take to heart. I'm gonna do the work, as they say. I'm gonna do the work and try to be a dilettante. But speaking of being a doer, the next person that I want to talk about, I heard him say, "Oh, I'm a big fan of his." So I've listened to him a lot over the years, and I remember him talking about his career and saying, I didn't really want to just learn, I wanted to do. And so he was a radio host and he sort of just jumped in. And I don't, the radio back in the day, back in the, I don't know, 70s, 80s, was more Wild West territory. You just kind of like jumped. And he ended up starting at a very small radio station in Ventura, California, which is about an hour north of LA. And one day he's hosting his radio show. And you know, no guests were calling or no callers were calling in, so he's just sitting there by himself. Because I can if you can imagine, like, the panic you have to create just by yourself. So what he did was he pretended to be a caller and called himself and ended up arguing with himself. So listeners are listening to this and they're really mad at the caller, but the caller's actually him. And it's like this magical dance that no one has the talent to pull off except him. His name's Phil Hendry. And he took this all the way to nationally syndicated radio, became, you know, big, successful show. But what I learned from him is that as the radio business changed, he had to change. And his multiple streams of talent acted as like a way to diversify his life's portfolio. So I think you need to have multiple streams, not just of income, but of talent or of interests, of curiosity. Because Phil, as the radio business changed and it became a little harder at times, there's still some great radio shows out there, but it became a little harder to earn the living he was making in terrestrial radio. He developed a podcast which does really well using some of the same skills that he was using on the radio. Then, because he's a talented guy, he started doing voice work on movies and TV shows. He started acting in movies and TV shows. And he took his old radio material, repurposed it, and sells it to people who are like Phil Hendry super fans. And they subscribe and listen to his old things whenever they want. So I just found it, even though Phil isn't retired, I thought, like you said, switching gears, that's really the way to look at retirement. I mean, we could just get rid of the word retirement and think of it as switching gears, I think people might approach it in the way we're hoping they will. Um, because Phil isn't retired, but Phil is doing what retirees should do. Does that make sense to you, Mallory?
That makes perfect sense, and I think you're nail on the head. I totally agree. Well, it's interesting because I hadn't put it together, so I'm really glad that you're kinda getting this all together and you've, like, pulled this because, with Phil Hendry, with the way that he was able to kind of take and morph what he had done with, like, his career and then turning it into, again, that multiple streams of talent where he was, like, just sorta it was switching gears. You're right. But what's funny
Yeah.
thinking about it, and we've actually heard that from so many other retirees where it's, they maybe stop working that traditional 9 to 5 in the office, but maybe they're still doing the books in their free time, or they're switching to like working from home 4 days a week, or maybe they're, taking their skills that they previously had and using it for a nonprofit. Like it's so interesting to sort of think about. You're right. I think these retirees, these happy retirees specifically, are really taking they're taking their talent that they've maybe cultivated in their career and switching gears so it's more of that multiple streams of talent.
Yeah, I mean, if you're gonna diversify your portfolio, why can't you diversify your life?
Oh,
You
there
know?
it is. There it is. That's exactly what we needed. Yes, thank you.
Yes. And for people, who are interested, Phil Hendry, there's a great documentary that just came out about him called Hendry, and it's got some real comedy heavy hitters in it, like Judd Apatow and Bill Hader from SNL and a million movies. So if you wanna go watch that to get a sense of what we're talking about, that's a good place to go. But speaking of sort of the celebrity life, this next lesson is very, very celebrity related. So I went to the Santa Barbara Zoo. My wife and I took our son there because kids love zoos, and honestly, so do I. And we went, and it was just so great. And one of the best attractions at the zoo was this little I guess, cute train that drives around the perimeter so you can see the animals and there's a like train conductor, but he's also kind of does like stand-up comedy as he tells you about the animals. And like there's a little alligator on the side, and they're like, oh, they'd love you if you'd give them a hand. Stuff like that, which is right up my alley because I'm a dad and I love dad jokes. So I was so sort of like delighted that I asked these train conductors if they would be on the show, and they said yes. So I went back and recorded an episode with Pete and Andy. And what I learned from them, getting back to celebrity, is that even Katy Perry wants to ride the retirement train. Now, I'm not saying Katy Perry's retired, but I am saying Katy Perry got on the train and let them drive her around and seemed to have a great time if you're looking at pictures from the tabloids, which they were happy to show me. And I think why Katy Perry probably enjoyed this train is why Pete and Andy do, and why I did, because they're doing something in their lives where they are helping people enjoy themselves. Because what Pete and Andy really showed, they're both very successful guys in their regular lives before this. Pete, he owned an insurance company, did really well financially. Andy was really high up in the CIA, the Central Intelligence Agency. I mean, this guy's like looking at terrorist files and stuff, and he gave that up. And now they both wear these like overalls and drive around in the train, and they don't get paid a lot, and they're like much happier. They feel like a demotion was a promotion, which I think is another theme that retirees can look at. Sometimes getting a demotion to a less stressful job is actually like a much better deal. Like they're happier than they've ever been. And driving people around in this train, showing people the animals, reminded me what a zoo life can be. That you have to sometimes take things into your own hands and figure out how you want it to look for yourself. I don't know, Maui. Tell me what kind of train rider would you be? Would you get on this train?
Listen, I just gotta take a second. I thought you were about to drop some kinda, like, serious dad joke there at the very end. I was gearing up for it. I was like, "It's coming."
I would've. I couldn't think of one. But I
I'm sure one will come to you in a minute. I've no doubt. I've no doubt. I was waiting for it though. But I will tell you, I think I love this because you want to talk about such one what is it, 160 from what these guys were doing previously, looking at terrorist files, thinking about worst case scenarios with insurance and the cost of those. And now they're just telling funny jokes on a train with kids and their parents in the zoo. I mean, like, talk about just moving to something so joyful, so fun. I think that these guys I'm so glad you found them. They do just seem like the perfect example of these happy retirees where because they're not doing it for the money. Let's just be honest here.
No.
This is certainly something this is a passion project, something they're very excited about. And and I think that that probably shines through to everyone that they interact with, including Katy Perry.
Exactly. I mean, if it's good enough for Katy Perry and Orlando Bloom, her husband, who was also in the picture, I think it's good enough for us, or at least for me. Maybe not. You might be even better than Katy Perry, Mallory.
Oh, you're so
Uh,
sweet. I don't know if I'd say that, but let's be very clear. I'm not gonna say you're better than Orlando Bloom because, like, that man is just mwah,
well, I,
beautiful.
I mean, and as as Andy said, and maybe seeing Katy Perry and Orlando Bloom are part of the perks, but he's this guy who was looking at like, what do we do about Bin Laden? I mean, to go from that to now, all he has to think about is like which otter gets which piece of fish. He thinks that's a step up, and I have to say, I think it might be too.
I would agree with that. I would agree with that.
So now the okay, so moving to our next lesson, it reminds me. So as we said, Pete and Andy on that train, they were technically employees, but they're not really making anywhere near the money they were in their careers. And to take that a step further, one thing that we found, and we've done a lot of surveys. When Wes Moss, who we mentioned earlier, was writing his book, "You Can Retire Sooner Than You Think," he surveyed 1,350 people, retirees across 46 states, and to find out like what they were doing, so he could maybe share that with other people. And one of the things that he found was that volunteering was always near or at the top of the list of what these people were doing. So I thought it was really important to talk to a couple people who have put volunteering at the top of their own list because volunteering means saying yes to happiness. And these two people, the first one we'll talk about, her name was Penny Martinez. So she started saving money at 6 years old and she started investing at 18. So I'll just for a minute, I'll not go into how jealous I am that she was so ahead, and I always feel like I'm constantly like, I should have invested that sooner. She made all the right choices, and her goal was to retire early, be debt free, and then find opportunities to give back to her community. And that's exactly what she's done. She accomplished all of those. She's she volunteers full time. And again, not about the money, but she reads to children in elementary schools. She works in the kitchen at an emergency shelter. She writes holiday cards to care facility residents, picks up trash, supports a pregnancy center. I mean, I could go on and on and on. She fights human trafficking, I will say, because that's a big one for her. But Penny is so happy because I think what they figure out, these retirees who volunteer, is that giving to someone else makes you happier than taking. Um, and I don't know what you thought about that, Mallory, but to me, I looked at it as like, I hope I can do half of what Penny does to give back to my own community.
I totally agree. I thought her story was so beautiful just in how she was so thoughtful in where all and how all she was able to really give back. I think that one thing that people one thing that happy retirees seem to have a great balance of is putting their time and energy thoughtfully toward these causes that they care about. And then, also oftentimes I think we hear they also give donations. It's
Hmm.
not necessarily one or the other is better or more in need, but I think, ultimately at the end of the day, just giving back and knowing that it's about more than just us. I think it's so easy, especially whenever people are in like that crunch of life where you've got kids and you're trying to make the bills and like, you're still trying to save. it's a lot harder maybe to, like, look outside of yourself and spend that time or that money on others, but in retirement, when you sort of get a little bit more of that breather because hopefully you have saved enough, right? Hopefully your kids are like,
Yeah.
they're independent and on their own and, coming to you with more fun stuff rather than, like, needs necessarily. And so,
Yeah.
you're able to kinda look bigger picture and beyond just yourself and your immediate. And I wish I could say more thoroughly with myself that I've given back more, I could say more definitively that, like, how great it is, but I can certainly imagine.
You give back every time I talk to you, so make sure you remember that.
Ah, well, thank
You're
you.
a very giving person.
Next time I call you and you're like, "No, Mallory," I'm gonna say, "You said I give back every time." Nor normally you're like, "Not again, Mallory."
Yeah. I know, it's like I answer the phone sort of like I'm scared. "Yes, what do you want me to do now?"
I just need some help with X, Y, and Z, and then if you got more free time after that.
As Mallory says, the content monster's hungry, and Mallory's always the one forcing us to feed it.
I just wanna make sure we get the message of happy retirees out there. I have no regrets.
Um, but so Penny is just amazing. And the second person that I found who volunteers so much, his name is Tom, and he works on the USS Midway, which is it was an aircraft carrier that got turned into a museum down in San Diego, California. It's a really spectacular museum. I highly recommend going. But the way that worked was his wife was horrified to discover that he had already saved enough money and he was able to retire because that was going to mean he was like home all the time, which I bet a lot of spouses can relate to. Uh, and so she basically said, "You gotta do something. You can't just, like, hang out in my space all the time." So he ended up getting this volunteer job, on the USS Midway, like, sort of working in the security department and helping people around the on I don't know if you call an aircraft carrier a ship, so forgive me, Navy guys. But he would help people around, and he told me that this is the best job he's ever had, and he doesn't even make a penny, and it's, like, the best. He's so happy, and I actually ended up talking to his daughter, and she said this volunteer job is like his 3rd and favorite child. That's how much he loves doing it.
And I love that so
Um,
much.
yeah. Yeah, so Tom, just like Penny, uh, even though he's a completely different personality, volunteering is so powerful that it transcends personality. It just that's how good it is for the soul.
Well, and I think to your point, they were very different people, and the volunteer programs that they were doing were very different as well. And so I wonder, maybe this is something else for us to study in the future, but I wonder how much, if you're going to go and look to start volunteering, you probably need to find an organization and a cause that really aligns with who you are and your values and things that you're really passionate about. One thing I
Yes.
loved with his story is how his son was in the military, in the Navy, if that's I believe, and a pilot.
He flew for the Marines. He would
That was
yeah,
it,
he
yes.
yeah.
Which yeah, so he flew for the Marines and Tom found that they had a plane on the ship that was actually I believe it was the one that his son flew, is that correct?
Yes. Yes.
That was amazing.
It just randomly, the plane was on the aircraft carrier. He looked at the serial number or however it's, categorized, and he asked his son, "Did you ever fly this specific plane?" And his son looked at his flight logs and said, "Yes." So he donated some money to get his son's name put on the plane.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
It's you wanna talk about, like, just a sign from the universe or God that, like, you're right place, right time. That was it.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. And it's like, as he told me that I'm sure he's told this story a lot of times, but he was crying telling me or, tearing up. And so it's still that powerful for him as I imagine it would be for anybody.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So thank you, Penny. Thank you, Tom. You really inspired us with the volunteering aspect, which again almost always tops the list of core pursuits from happy retirees. It's usually either volunteering or travel. So between Ingrid Ricard, Penny Martinez, and Tom Georgia, we have some really great core pursuit choosers in this group that we've compiled.
Maybe we need to interview somebody who, like, travels to volunteer.
Wow. Well, combine it. Oh
Yeah.
my gosh. Okay. See, this is what producer Mallory does. She comes up with the episodes that we need. We'd be just kind of flailing out here without her.
Oh, you're so sweet. This is so great. I should have come on the show a lot sooner so I could just hear you say all these nice things about me.
Well, as people know, Mallory's sometimes on Wes's show, Retire Sooner, and so I want to really butter her up so we can steal her over here because she's got offers.
I'm very
Yeah.
busy.
Yes. All right. So speaking of offers, this next person, her name's Nancy Volpe Behringer, and I am blown away we were able to get her on the show. I think her episode deserves millions and millions of listens. Um, she was the oldest designer to ever appear on the hit show Project Runway, which I was just like blown away by when I heard that. To be at that point in your life and still say, "I'm gonna do this," because I imagine going on a show like that's a lot of work and a lot of um feeling insecure, like, am I good enough to do this? I'm gonna be on TV with these designers. Is this, you know, on and on and on. And she just like gritted her teeth and did it. At 64, she made it to the finale at New York Fashion Week. Um, and what she kind of specialized in for a lot of her designs was for people with disabilities, like designing a dress for someone in a wheelchair. She's like, no problem. Prosthetic leg, you know, child's play. Come on, I can do that. Which I think is such a great attitude with I imagine a lot of designers don't have or don't think about because if you don't have that challenge in your life, you just maybe aren't thinking about it. But Nancy is. So she eventually created the Vault by Volpe Behringer, which was the world's first and only fully accessible designer luxury platform that offered adaptable options and complimentary consultations for the disabled community. She's won a bunch of awards I won't go into. She's the star of Philadelphia's fashion community, and she ended up designing a viral red carpet design for Grammy nominee and rapper Tierra Whack.
This was an amazing episode, and it's interesting because I think a lot of this actually echoes back to the first point you made with Jill, where it's, somebody who really followed her dream in retirement because she had this getting onto the show was such a huge win and such a huge, accomplishment to make so much later in life, and again, it kinda comes back to there's no age limit. I loved that.
Oh, absolutely. She to be at that point and to work your way up to being on Project Runway and kind of being like, I don't know, the hot new thing who's in her 60s is just I know how hard it is at any age to try something new, but I would imagine at that age it's even harder because you're thinking it already passed you by. But she doesn't have that attitude. She's from Philadelphia, so she's like Rocky, right? The Italian stallion. She just gets in the ring and ends up winning.
She's gonna get in there, she's gonna do it. Well, and it's interesting because actually and now that I think about it, she's really, like, almost like an amalgamation of several of these, right? Because she's following
Yeah.
her dream. It's not volunteering, but she's giving back with the disabled community and sort of showing that representation with them, and then she also is trying new things. So she's really just she's checking several boxes for us in our happy retiree findings, right?
Yeah, and that really relates to curiosity, which is a huge uh, part of happiness in retirement. People that are curious and are want to try things out. That's a really good way to stay active and to stay sort of like interested in your life, right? If you're not curious and you think you've done it, then you're just gonna not you're not gonna keep growing.
Totally agreed, totally agreed.
Yeah. Well, okay. Since Nancy was the oldest person to ever be on Project Runway, I have to now go to Michael Blowen because Michael insists that being old is better than being young. I had never really heard this take before. This is a real hot take. And you come to the Happiest Retirees podcast when you want your hot takes or your hot gossip, your bochinche. But Michael, he was just no bones about it. He said, I love being old. So take that. And I did take that and I took it to heart because he was such a charming guy. He was a film critic for the Boston Globe for years. And in the after doing this for years, one time in the middle of an awful movie, he just snapped and he stood up and yelled at the other critics. He was like, how can you endure this? This movie's terrible. How can we just sit here and write about these terrible movies? I can't do this anymore. So today he's much happier. He started a thoroughbred aftercare facility in Georgetown, Kentucky called Old Friends. And he's helped turn a modest mom and pop operation into a sprawling 236-acre farm. They even have satellite locations. And what they do is they help take care of horses who might be past their prime, who aren't in demand anymore, but are still beautiful, gorgeous animals, and they help them have a good life. So not only is Michael retired, but the horses are retired. So it's like this retirement party on this horse farm.
It it sounds
Yeah,
it sounds great, right? Like, I just that sounds like the
yeah,
dream. I love that he was just like, "Alright, y'all, I'm over this. I'm gonna go get on a farm with retired racehorses and just" so incredible. I actually I was out in Kentucky and Doolittle, I remember you texted me and you were like, "You
yes, I
want
wanted
his
you to
number?"
go. Yeah, I
I
wanted
should've
you to go.
I should have taken you up on it. Oh,
The big takeaway from Michael is that being old is better than being young.
yes,
He
yes.
and the way he explained it was like, "Remember when you were young and everyone got to tell you what you had to do? No one tells me what to do. In fact, now that I'm this old, if I don't wanna go to someone's birthday party, no one even gives me a hard time about it. They're like, 'Eh, he's old, he doesn't have to come.'"
I love
Which
that.
it's like a dream.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, and it's actually it's funny, I don't know that we hear enough how much people, like, love to be on being older. You always hear that it's always it's always better than the other option, right? Getting old is better than the
Right,
other option
or
'cause it's not getting old.
exactly, or like not that bad, right? It's not
Yeah.
that bad.
Yeah, but to
Yeah.
hear people just loving it, and, like, that makes so much sense because when you're younger, all you think about is, like, how great it's gonna be when you get older. So, like, why don't we celebrate that more? Because to your point, I love this idea that, like, if you don't wanna go to the birthday party, you don't go and nobody says a thing. That sounds so great.
Oh my gosh. Imagine a guilt-free pass to not do the things you didn't wanna do. Well, you
It
can
sounds like
get there. All
permit.
you have to do is get old, you know? And I also wanna say, like, I really wish I were the type of person who didn't name drop, but I'm just not a big enough person, so I am gonna name drop here because Michael, he's good friends with, celebrity Albert Brooks and Angie Dickinson. Like, these are the type of people who wanna hang out with a guy who takes care of retired horses. Like, that's the kinda guy who it's a very esteemed class of person, you know?
I think you have to be a pretty esteemed class of person to, like, have a horse farm out in Kentucky with retired race horses that are beautiful.
Yes. Michael has won the Kentucky Derby of retirement.
Yeah.
I'm
Oh,
gonna I'm
that's
gonna
it.
I'm gonna
There
say
it
that.
is. That's
Yes.
good. But, yeah, and I think and he loves it because he is getting older, and he loves being older.
Exactly. So, Michael, I salute you. He's another person that I smile every time I think of him. And he did part of it was moving his home from Boston to Kentucky. And speaking of moving homes, this next lesson I learned was from Ed and Cynthia. They went a little further. So they moved from the United States all the way to Ecuador, and now they are expats living in Ecuador. And the reason this happened is during the financial crisis back in around somewhere around 2008, when the real estate bubble burst and people were really hurting. It really destroyed their retirement plans. Financially, you have some plans, and when the economy goes away, that can change those plans. So they started doing some research and looking at cost of living, and they found this city called Cuenca, Ecuador. Um, and kind of their expectation was maybe we can go there and make ends meet with what we have saved, what we're going to be making, with Social Security or whatever other income streams they had. And rather than making ends meet, they're like thriving. They've they reside they live in a 3,000 square foot penthouse apartment, and even with that, they can still afford a housekeeper, they eat out a lot, and they can cover all their healthcare costs. I mean, and I know for me, I thought, "Yeah, but Cuenca, Ecuador, are you like," and this is gonna sound really like ignorant American guy, but I was like, "Are you like in the jungle? I really have no idea what I'm picturing." And they're like, "No, I walk to my yoga studio." It's like, "Oh, that sounds like Brooklyn or something." So they really recommend that this is an option for people who might really be looking for a lower cost of living. And they're not the only ones because according to the Social Security Administration, the number of retirees drawing Social Security outside of the US saw an increase between a staggering saw a staggering increase between 2007 and 2017. So I think Ed and Cynthia might really be onto something. Uh, if you have any desire to live somewhere else, it might be an option for you to have a happy retirement. What do you think?
So, and one thing that I think it's important to mention in this is they moved there so they could live exclusively on their Social Security, if I remember correctly.
I think you're right. Yeah.
So that's
Yeah.
I mean, the idea of moving to a foreign country so that you can just keep a similar level of lifestyle while exclusively living on Social Security, I think that's just incredible, and I think it's so smart. I think mostly though, you know what the big thing I think it is? I think it's very adventurous.
Yes. Yeah.
I definitely think that it's very inspirational and something that for those who maybe are looking for in their as they're shifting gears to maybe try something more adventurous, especially if it's maybe somebody who's not been able to, or maybe they have been able to in their day-to-day life, but they're ready for a different kind of adventure. Like it's such a great option and so inspirational. And they had great suggestions on other places I think that people could
They
also
did.
potentially move to, which was I love that.
Yeah, I think in fact they were saying when they were looking at Cuenca, it was not widely known, and now a lot of Americans have moved there, and so there's other cities on the up and coming list of expat destinations. So like you said, it's an adventurous thing. So some retirees are very adventurous, some aren't. So you need to kind of look in the mirror and decide what kind of retiree you want to be. And if this is right for you, it might be a good option. I mean, I can't imagine having that kind of penthouse and still being able to afford anything else.
Right? Yeah, yeah.
So
Here in
that's
America, it's definitely and lifestyle's gonna
yeah,
look real different.
exactly. Now, if producer Mallory wants to kind of give us all a raise, maybe I could just do that here. But until then, I think Cuenca, Ecuador is a good option.
Let me see what I can do.
Oh, thank you. And I just talked engineer Marissa is listening too. She just nodded her head and said she'd like a raise too. So, yes. Okay. So next on the list, this is a guy that I interviewed recently. And he kind of fits into that mantra that I've had for a long time now that if you have a British accent, you're automatically smart and wise and interesting. But he actually is. He has the accent and he's wise and smart and interesting. And the takeaway that I got from him is that the biggest risk of all is never taking a risk. And this really helped me because I may have mentioned before, like I have some perfectionistic tendencies that where I can worry a problem to death and then I never actually do anything. So it's like I just defeated myself, you know? And but the way he said that really made me kind of rethink it. Not taking a risk is just as bad as like taking the risk and maybe failing. I mean, what's what's the difference? At least you tried. So, in his own life, he had done well financially, which I find is a theme with a lot of the happy retirees we've interviewed. They had the finances down, but the other part, the happiness part, was harder than they thought it would be. So he looked to someone else wise, with a German accent named Albert Einstein, who once said, "Look deep into nature, and then you will understand everything better." So he gave it a shot, and he kind of looked around, took some time to ponder, and what he noticed was like, "Hey, none of these polar bears leave with severance packages. I mean, I'm not seeing any Komodo dragons wearing a gold watch that they got at their retirement party. So I think in nature, the wildlife is either growing or dying." And he said, "I don't want to be dying, so I'm going to start growing. How do I do that?" And so the way he did that was by changing the word retirement into rewirement or refirement and going out and creating a new identity for himself. So maybe he wasn't growing in his career anymore, but he just got back from a safari where he ate ostrich steak in South Africa, or he cycled in the rain in Vancouver. These are things he never would have done. But the new George Jurgen does do those things because he's reinvented who he is and what his goals are. So don't think of retirement, George says, as a vacation because that's going to last a week or two and then you're going to end up just stagnant. You have to figure out what you want to do and then go get it. And if it takes risks to get there, remember, it's worse to never take those risks than it is to go for what you want to do. I think, Mallory, you might be someone who does take risks and you got it. You're good at it. You're better than me. You go for it and it seems casual, but you're really doing some hard things.
You are so sweet. You again, just full of compliments. I'm loving this, just so we're very clear. But I do love a good thoughtful risk, and I totally agree. I think that this is so interesting. But I wanna take a second. So I do wanna take a second because you just said something that, like, really hit me hard and that I really love. The happy retirees, they've got the finance piece figured out, and that is obviously that's
Yeah.
important, but happiness is harder, and I
Yeah.
think I love that. I think that's so spot on for so many people because I know you've also reached out to a fair number of folks to, like, be on the show, and they're like, "I don't necessarily have the happy retiree piece thing figured out," and it's not even that they're not hitting a lot of these boxes, but they're not necessarily as confident in it, and so coming back to this, the biggest risk of all is not taking a risk, and that I think that we see that with every single person that we've just talked through.
Exactly. Yes. These people seem good at taking risks and the rewards are so plain to see. Um not everyone has their finances in order, but a lot of people think that's the only thing you have to worry about. So it really doesn't seem to work that way from these people that we've examined. These happy retirees that we've put in the petri dish or under the microscope because they were kind enough to let us. They even when they had the finances worked out, there were so many other challenges. And like you said, the happiness part, the lifestyle part is kind of harder.
It is. I think it's because it probably shifts and changes so constantly and it's so personal. A lot of it comes back to, taking these risks, which people I think inherently can be wary of. I think people don't necessarily like change, and especially like you like, or maybe you like change and you like risk whenever you can control certain things, or like maybe there's like, you know what I mean? And I think
Yeah.
it takes a lot of guts. It takes a lot of, or maybe it takes a lot of planning, or maybe it takes a lot of outlining what you are and aren't comfortable with to take risks and to do that well. And, I love that he's going and eating ostrich steak. Like, that is I love that he learned that from polar bears that they're not taking they're growing, they're not dying. I love that. I love that.
Yeah, there's no Komodo dragons aren't wearing that gold watch you get when you retire. They're they're,
Exactly.
they're either living or dying.
I love
Yeah.
it.
As we sort of wrap up this amazing 1 year anniversary show, um, I want to thank our audience for giving us this opportunity, and I to pay respects. That's why I wore the tuxedo because it really is like a grand occasion for us. Um, Doing this show was a risk. When I look back at it now, I mean, we didn't necessarily know it would take off. We had an idea. We took it to Wes and the marketing team, and and they believed in us. And you seem to believe in us too. And we promise our promise here is that we're going to keep going and we're going to keep trying to find out um, how people can refocus that lens and ask, now that you're grown up, what do you want to do? I mean, everyone always says, what do you want to be when you grow up? But now you're grown up, and this is the time you can actually maybe be what you want to be. Um, you can reinvent yourself. And to help you get there, we're going to keep going straight to the source, the happy retirees themselves. We're going to find out the essence of their lives. We're gonna regale you with stories of their post career lifestyles, and we're going to tell you where they stumbled, but we're also going to tell you where they triumphed. So thank you so much for coming along on this ride on this happy retirement train. Shout out to the Santa Barbara Zoo. Um, Thank you for joining us, Mallory. I want to thank you for being on the show and really taking us up a level in terms of classy wisdom.
I was listening, you showed up in a tux, and I was like, "All right, better bring my A game." Thank you for having
Um,
me, though, seriously, I really appreciate it.
well, thank you too, and thank you to our engineer, Marissa, who, if it weren't for her, I'd be talking to myself right now and no one would be listening to it. So thank you to her, and thank you to producer Lauren, who does such a great job. Wes for being our godfather. Holly Wasan, who's always been in our quarter. Everyone at Capital Investment Advisors and on the Retire Sooner team. This is really I don't want to get too hokey, but this is kind of a dream come true for me. And I really hope that we're helping other people become happier in their retirement. So thank you so much for joining us.